Josh with Cardinal Offroad, and today we're going to be installing Rough Stuff's caliper upgrade for the Sterling rear axle. So this is Rough Stuff's disc brake kit. What makes this kit different from others and why I chose this one is it has a disc brake emergency brake. So you can do away with the drum and just stay strictly disc, which is a better option. Now the way this works is a cable will be ran through here, and it's no different than a regular emergency brake cable. And then when you pull or set the emergency brake, it's going to clamp this down, put pressure on the pads, and therefore you have your emergency brake. So that's kind of a nice setup. Now a lot of guys are doing the El Dorado swap because they had disc brakes for the emergency brake, but I've heard a lot of downfalls on those. I've heard they're hard to adjust, so it's not really the best option in my opinion. So, and this is all new, so you don't have to do nothing to it, clean it up or anything like that. It's not rusted or anything like that. So when you buy it, it comes with a caliper. It's going to come with a rotor, but it will only work with the old bolt pattern. So obviously I have a metric bolt pattern, so I think that changed in like 2005-ish maybe, not sure. I could be wrong on that one. So depending on what bolt pattern you have, if you have the metric bolt pattern, the rotor will not work. That's okay though. So I used my rotor. I just went to Advance, bought my rotors for the rear, and they're a little bit thicker, not much, maybe like an 1/8 inch thicker than the old style. So all you have to do, what I did is I had a stand-up belt sander. I just placed these pads on there and just took about maybe like a 1/16 of maybe just a little bit more off each pad. Made sure it was even, obviously, and it's good to go now. So just one thing you need to remember if you're going to go that route. And you only have to worry about that if you have an earlier model or later model. So because of the bracket, now there again, if you have, like, don't correct me, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a 2005 or newer, this will not line up with your bolt holes. So obviously it doesn't line up with mine. It wouldn't matter either way because I'm mounting mine at the 12 o'clock position. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to fabricate to do to make this work. It's actually pretty simple. Now if this does work for your model, you also, it comes with a spacer if you need to get it spaced out a little bit further away from the wheel, so as far as the caliper goes. So it comes with that spacer as well. And there's certain models that, or certain years that I'll need this. Also comes with a pack of hardware. There's not a whole lot in here. A couple banjo bolts and some brake lines just to get you started, to get you to the hard line. So it also looks like it has some brackets, it looks like, for the wire or for the cable as well. So now that we went over all this, I'm going to go ahead and fabricate my bracket. I'll kind of show you how I do that. That way if you guys want to do the same thing, kind of give you an idea. Okay, so the first step in making my own bracket is taking the old bracket. Now obviously this one's been cut, and I'll show you why here in a minute. So this is the bracket that came off the Sterling, the original bracket for the brakes. These holes right here mount to the axle. There's 4 of them. So what I did, and my thoughts were, rather than have to make a whole new plate and then try to get these holes exact, I'll just take this piece, cut this top piece off, and then I was left with just this piece right here, only using 3 holes because that's what the other bracket was using. Like that. I cut this section out, obviously, so it fits over my axle tube. And here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to mount this to the axle, mount this to my caliper. Everything's going to be where it needs to be, and then I'm going to weld this piece to this. And that's going to give me a new bracket, and it's going to make it so I can mount my caliper at the 12 o'clock position. So I already did the driver's side or the passenger side. It took a little bit of thinking, but once I did it, it's extremely simple. So when you're welding to this, This is cast, but it's cast steel, so you can weld to cast steel. The easiest way to tell the difference, if you watch my other videos, what I do is I'll put a piece of regular steel next to whatever I'm trying to figure out what it is, hit it with a grinder, hit this with a grinder. If the sparks are the same, it's cast steel. Should be like the oranges or red, whatever color. If it's cast iron, I don't even know if it'll throw any sparks, or it might, but they're a different color, and I can't remember what color they are. So when it's cast steel, the easiest, like I said, the easiest thing to do is just put a piece of steel there beside it. Tap it with a grinder, look at the sparks. Tap this with a grinder, look at the sparks, and then you'll know. So when I did my high steer kit for the front Dana 60, that's what I did to find out if it's cast steel or cast iron. So now we know that. So I cut that section out. This will fit, the axle tube will fit right in there. Like I said, I'm going to weld this to that, and we're good to go. So we'll go ahead and mount these up, and then I'll show you guys how it looks. So I went ahead, obviously put that back mount on that bracket, bolted it up, mounted the caliper to the bracket that it comes with. So when that happens, you don't want this caliper just all the way down. Obviously it's going to be on these rods right here that hold the pads into place, and also holds the caliper to the bracket. So all I did was use some cardboard, stick it underneath there, stick it underneath there. I'm using that for spacers, that way this rotor will be able to move freely. Now you don't want a lot of space, because if you bring this up too high, then your pads are not going to be fully touching the rotor. So you don't need to bring it up real high, you just want a little bit of gap there, just to give it enough room for the rotor to spin. Got the caliper where I want it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a tack here, and then I'll do a couple tacks on the other side. Once it's tacked into place, I'll take and pull everything off, pull this bracket off, and then I'll fully weld it. And I'll show you guys how to weld to cast steel as well. So I'm going to go ahead and tack that into place, and I'll take it off and show you guys what I'm going to do. Put the bracket off. Now this is the bracket that came with the caliper. This is the bracket that was on the Sterling axle originally. I'm going to weld these two together. And like I said, when you're welding this cast, if you think it's cast steel, like I said, hit with a grinder, see what the sparks are. Unless you think it's cast iron, you'll be able to tell the difference in the sparks. Now when you're welding to cast steel, it's very simple. If you watched any of my other videos when I weld to my axle or the high steer kit, I did the same process. So I'm going to use this torch. It's just a little propane torch. Heat this up to about 400 degrees. Once it's at 400, I'm going to go ahead and weld it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my torch where I'm going to weld the steel and the cast together. I'm just going to heat that area up until it's 400 degrees. Now I'm going to do a pretty good area, and then as I weld, this heat is going to spread through this entire bracket. So it's going to heat up tremendously. Once it's heated up, you want to cool it slowly, that way the weld does not crack, because the steel and the cast are going to cool down slower or at different times, or however you want to say it. So once it's done, you can either hit it with the torch again and then wait a little bit, hit it with the torch again, and then just kind of gauge it as it's going down to make sure it's not cooling down too fast. You can do it that way, wrap it up in a welding blanket, or what I'm going to do is I got a tub of sand. I'm going to throw it in a tub of sand and just let it sit overnight. I think the sand is honestly the best way because it takes forever for this thing to cool down. So let's go ahead and heat it up and we'll weld it. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover the metal up with sand, and then we'll let it sit overnight and cool down. Okay, so we got the caliper mounted at the 12 o'clock position. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering this video why I would mount the caliper at the 12 o'clock. So this is my idea. So for one, there's not a lot of space here between the coil spring and where the hub would be or where the rotor would be. I can get it in there, but it's a little tight, so that's one reason. The next reason is if it's down here on the side, it's going to be in the way of rocks and stuff like that. And what I don't want to happen is this emergency brake to get broken off or to get smashed. So that's another reason why I don't want it down here. So I'm thinking if I move it up here, it's going to keep it out of the way of components, but also it's going to keep it out of the way of the rocks. So, and that's my main purpose for this Jeep, is for rocks and stuff like that. So it's going to keep it from getting damaged. The only downfall, a couple of downfalls of having it up here, is the first one, it's not going to get the airflow as it would if it was on the back of the rotor or the 9 o'clock position. And that's why you see a lot of rotors in the back, is because when that airflow is coming from front to back, it's actually cooling down this a lot more than it would if it was up here on top or if it was in the 3 o'clock position. So that's one reason why it's on the back. I'm not too concerned about that. This isn't going to see a lot of highway use. It's mainly going to be slow trail riding, so therefore I'm not getting much airflow regardless. The other issue is bleeding the caliper. So the bleed valve is right here on the back, and you normally want that at the top because the air is going to rise when it's within the brake fluid. So it's actually going to rise to the top. Therefore, if you have the bleeder on top, if you bled brakes before, you pull down the pedal, release that, and it's going to let the air come up. So that's going to be one issue. So my thoughts are, the rotor is 1 3/8. A 2x4 is 1.5 inches wide. My thoughts are, I'm going to take the caliper off. I'll slap a 2x4 between both pads, bleed it like that, and then so I can have the caliper sitting up like it should be. I'll bleed it like that. Once it's bled, I'll throw it back on. Should be very simple, and with the extra 1/8 inch, it's going to slide right on the rotor, no problem. So that's my plan, and that's the reason why I mounted the rotor or the caliper at the 12 o'clock position. All right, so there you go. We're all done. Got it mounted. I'm not going to hook up the brake lines yet because I don't have them ran from the front. I still got to do front brakes as well. So I just want to go get these mounted up, and then I'm going to mount the front ones up, and then we'll run our brake lines and go from there. So let me know what you guys think, if this is going to work or not, or if you've done it before. I know there's a few guys out there that have done it, and the biggest issue that I seem to, from what I've read, is bleeding them. So we're going to try the 2x4. I think that's the best option. And then once we get them bled, we'll be all set. So make sure you guys comment, subscribe, hit the thumbs up.